A few years ago, I had a very heated debate with my dad about sharks. I made the argument that their migration pattern had evolved due to the transatlantic slave trade. He thought that was ridiculous. What frustrated me wasn't that I knew that I was right, it was that he couldn't name a single source to back his argument, yet he still walked away thinking that he won. We haven't talked about sharks since the debate, but this is something that still lived rent-free in my head. I decided to finally do some research to settle the score. Today we're going to be talking about the transatlantic slave trade and the shocking evidence linking it to the movement of sharks. If your education on the transatlantic slave trade is a little scarce, you're not alone. Many of us, especially in certain parts of the country, never got the full story. So let's start with building that foundation. Back in the mid-1500s, the transatlantic slave trade played a huge role in the economic development of Europe. Countries like Britain, Spain, and France were heavily involved in what's called triangular trade. Europeans would manufacture goods like textiles, metals, weapons, and alcohol and take them to Africa to trade them for slaves. In return, Europe would take these newly acquired possessions to various colonies in the Americas to produce things like cotton, sugar, and tobacco. That cotton, sugar, and tobacco would be sent back over to Europe to become guilty pleasures like cigars, fashions, and alcohol. The part of this trade that we'll be focusing on today is the transportation of slaves to the Americas, also known as the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage was a voyage of terror. Close to 2 million enslaved Africans would die on this journey. Some refer to slave ships as floating tombs because of the rampant disease and malnutrition caused by brutal overcrowding. Many, seeking any form of escape, chose suicide by jumping overboard. This massive death toll was no accident, and the captains weaponized it. The bodies of those who perished were thrown overboard, creating endless food trails for sharks. The ship's crew would then explicitly point out these circling predators to the enslaved. They used these sharks as tools of psychological warfare, threatening that anyone who defied them or attempted to jump would be torn apart. In effect, they turned these sharks into personal security guards for these slave ships. The offering was so abundant that these species ditched many of their typical migration patterns to feast on the grim trail of bodies left by the Middle Passage. The most loyal customers of this Poseidon sea bar was the bull and tiger shark, two species known as opportunistic feeders capable of long-distance migrations. While other sharks like hammerheads and great whites were occasionally spotted, none were as consistent as the tiger and bull sharks. This gruesome ecological subsidy, however, couldn't last forever. Once slavery was abolished both officially and unofficially, the number of floating buffets would decrease drastically. Eventually, the Mid-Passage diner would be completely out of business, and sharks would have to return to their normal route. After all of that research, it turns out that my dad and I were both right. I was right that the migration pattern of sharks did change for a moment, but he was also right in the fact that it was not a permanent evolution. So the final score, it's a tie. The sharks got temporary migration change, I got validation, and my dad has these resources to check out now.